This is the Last Man Standing podcast with your host, Richard James.
You are going to die. It could be today, it could be in 50 years, but it is an absolute 100% guarantee nobody gets out of this life alive. There's no loophole for the rich. There's no hacking the system for the powerful. There's no science, religion, or technology that defies the reality of our physical deaths. If you're feeling uncomfortable right now, that's because we don't really talk about it. It's like the elephant in the room our entire lives. It's unpleasant. It's not nice to talk about. It doesn't feel good. But that doesn't stop it from being true. The fear of death is the core driver in most people's lives, and that's not good. Ask any psychiatrist or psychologist, a book publisher, advertising experts, they'll all tell you the same thing, that fear drives decision-making in nearly every area of our lives. Careers, hobbies, friends, meals, the spouses we marry, the cars we drive, the gods we worship. The book of Hebrews describes the fear of death as lifelong slavery. Under the influence of the fear of death, we cease to live as free men, living our lives from our hearts and our spirits, and instead we become slaves in bondage to compulsive, subconscious risk assessment. We might not be conscious of it, but nearly everything we do is motivated by the avoidance of death. Many psychologists now subscribe to this idea of the terror management theory. It's an idea that most fears are connected in some way, at least, to the fear of death, where our little fears, like fear of failure, spiders, or public speaking, are actually an expression of how we process the greater fear of our inevitable demise. Something I find interesting about the subject of death is how much denial we actually have about it. Most of us try not to think about dying. Do you ever consider how strange it is that death being such a normal and certain thing, yet we find it unbelievably surprising when it happens to someone we know or love? I find it interesting in those times when friends and family pass away, how the reality of our own mortality comes to surface like a beach ball that was held underwater. When it's released, it pops up with incredible force, and it often punches you right in the face. One danger I see in suppressing our acceptance of death is that it keeps us ignorant to our real lives. This denial implies that if we don't think about death, then we'll live forever. Well, this logic would be like assuming that if we don't think about paying the mortgage, it'll never become due. If we choose to live by that standard, we'd be less motivated to make responsible choices with work and our finances, right? The book of Psalms says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." In order to truly value and make the best of our lives, we've got to accept that we have a limited amount of time. And if we believe there's meaning and purpose and mission in our lives, which I can promise you there is, then we've got to become clear on how we manage our time and attention so that we'll make choices based on our assignment. We'll align our lives around the vision that we carry. We'll get serious about God, and we'll get serious about our own growth. In 1938, Napoleon Hill wrote a somewhat crazy but super insightful book called Outwitting the Devil. In this book, he claimed to have interviewed the devil. He was so paranoid about how controversial that the book was, he actually wouldn't release it until after he was dead. I think it came out over 100 years later. One of the core ideas in this book was the description of a type of person called a drifter. Hill stated that a drifter is a person who has no real direction or ambition. This type of person is most susceptible to the devil's control, as they have nothing to actually live for. Now, I don't believe that Hill actually interviewed the devil, but I do think that the idea has some merit. You don't want to drift through time. You want to be a good steward of the resource of time that you've been blessed with. That's why I like the imagery of skulls. They're a constant reminder to me that I'm only clocked in for a short time to accomplish a specific assignment before I'm abruptly punched out. They also remind me of my faith, that Scripture tells me that I died with Christ and that now I'm dead to sin and alive to God. It's actually out of my death with Christ that I can yield my time for His plans and for His purposes. And it's out of being alive to God that I'm animated to walk those plans and those purposes out. When I was young, I was a drifter. I sort of did what I felt like most of the time. I didn't always see much meaning in my life. Well, because of that, I partied. I partied pretty hard. I chain smoked 2 packs of Marlboro Reds a day. I didn't take care of my health or invest much in my future because I wasn't numbering my days. Now I'm a little bit older. I'm a little bit wiser. I'm no longer a drifter. I love my life. I feel called to specific goals and purposes. And over the last year, I've been very intentional about numbering my days. In fact, I even settled on a number, 36,525. That's how many days I desire to live on this earth. By those numbers, I'm looking at 21,184 remaining days. I'll save you the math. That's a lifetime of 100 years, and that's 58 remaining years. Now, some of you have questions. How do you know you're going to live 100 years? Well, I don't. I could die tomorrow for all I know. I yield that part of my life to God. But here's the thing. If you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. If I plan to live to be 100, I now have a deadline in my mind. This is helpful to have. It helps me narrow my focus and determine almost every activity in my life. So if I'm going to live to 100, I'll need to eat and work out for serious longevity. I don't want to be 100 with a bad hip or stuck in a wheelchair or hooked up to IVs or ventilators or missing all my teeth. I have to make decisions now that will enable me to live well until I hit that century I'm going for. Now, if I'm intentional about reaching 100, then I have to be pretty strategic about how I apply this to every corner of my life. I want to die with many loving relationships, having loved and served my wife faithfully, a rich and spiritual and financial inheritance for my children and for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. I want to have discipled many men in the gospel, to have developed into a strong leader who built up more strong leaders. Now, yesterday I was thinking and praying about this, and I realized something. I always hear the super wealthy or the highly successful people say that a key to accomplishment is writing down your goal or your vision. I do this all the time for short-term goals, but I'd never done it as a way of summarizing a vision for my entire life. That's pretty intense. So without thinking much of it, I got out a piece of paper and a pen, and I began to write out my obituary. Yeah, my obituary. Now, I am walking the talk right now, baby. If I'm going to come into a healthy acceptance of death, then I know that it is wise to clearly define the end goal. Why not write out the obituary that I would desire to see written about me? So I wrote down my name, feels a little bit morbid. Then I wrote parentheses, 1982-2082 parentheses. Felt weird. But then I started to write the good stuff, the story of my still unlived life. I dreamed, I accepted possibilities, I smiled, I cried some happy tears. I felt the value that I felt for loved ones. I looked over the generations of fruit that will come from a dead tree named Richard. It was an amazing experience. I've actually never felt so much clarity and so much focus as I did in that very moment. I also felt the fear of death actually leaving me. If I believe that my life ends at 100 and I have a sense of purpose and I'm clear on the direction that I'm heading in between now and then what do I have to be afraid of in the meantime? Carpe diem, right? So listen, if you feel like a drifter sometimes, and we all do, if you desire more clarity, more intentionality, I want to recommend that you try this. Give it a shot. But one thing, invite God into it. Ask the Spirit to breathe on your time. Proverbs says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will keep your path straight. And that's what this is about, your path. So acknowledge Him. Ask Him to help you count your days. Ask Him for direction. Enjoy your experience of writing out your obituary. Keep it light. Keep it full of the good stuff that you truly desire to fill your life out with. And I think you're going to have a great experience. Now, before we go, I want to remind you to sign up for our free Last Men Habit Challenge. I send out a fun weekly challenge each Sunday to keep you on top of your game. Sign up at lastmen.us/challenge. That's lastmen.us/challenge. Until next time, I'm Richard James.
Thanks for listening to the Last Men Standing podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. Visit our weekly blog at lastmen.us.